In 1832, when Albany was still a remote military outpost, brothers John and Lawrence Morley built a modest yet sturdy dwelling on a 240-acre block overlooking Princess Royal Harbour. John was a former sailor with the East India Company and one of the region's earliest settlers. He was no stranger to construction. He also leased the old farm at Strawberry Hill and built Wollaston House. At the time, Albany had little in the way of settlement. When Richard Spencer arrived in 1833 to take up his role as magistrate, he described the town as only having 3 miserable houses. The Morleys cottage was one of them. In August 1834, a Scottish immigrant named Patrick Taylor arrived in Western Australia. During his voyage, he met Mary Yates Bussell, whom he later married. A year later, in 1835, Taylor purchased the Morleys cottage for £400, though the land had been significantly reduced from its original 240 acres. The cottage would remain in the Taylor family for over a century. Patrick passed away in 1877, and Mary continued to live in the house until her death in 1887. Their son inherited the property, which stayed in the family until the 1950s. The cottage itself is a fascinating example of early settler architecture. Built primarily from wattle and daub, a mix of clay, chaff, and even cow manure for added durability, the structure showcases the resourcefulness of early builders. The walls were finished with a final coat of cow manure that made them waterproof, while the original wooden floors, made of pitsaw and jarrah, were secured with handmade nails. Over time, modifications were made. Sunbaked bricks and weatherboards enclosed much of the veranda, and the original shingled roof was replaced by corrugated iron. In the 1960s, the cottage had fallen into disrepair and was condemned as unfit for habitation. Recognising the historical significance, the Albany Historical Society stepped in, campaigning to save it from demolition. Their efforts paid off, and in 1964 the cottage was opened as Albany's first museum. Today it houses an impressive collection of over 2,000 historic items, including English porcelain, silverware, antique clocks, costumes and kitchenware. Some pieces date back as far as the 1600s. Now owned by the Historical Society, Patrick Taylor Cottage is officially listed on the State Register of Heritage Places, securing its legacy as Western Australia's oldest surviving dwelling. Nestled below road level on Duke Street, surrounded by an English cottage garden and mature trees, this historic home remains a window into Albany's earliest days, a tangible link to the pioneering spirit of Western Australia. Although the roof is now made of corrugated iron, look up as you enter the veranda by the front entrance. You'll see some original shingles still sitting, now protected, under the new covering. Like all good historic buildings, Patrick Taylor Cottage has its own ghost story. Major Frederick Ingleby is said to appear in the main bedroom each September, wearing his 19th century field officer's uniform, his arm in a sling, presumably from the hand wound he received during the Boer War. The figure shimmers and then reappears as a frail old man lying in bed.